first thing you'd hear somebody say who was a lower enlisted person was, there goes Sergeant so-and-so just taking care of himself as always. Like they immediately thought and equated that as there goes that guy to take care of himself when you got this whole team that hasn't eaten breakfast even.
Jerry, what's going on?
Hey, not much. How you guys doing?
Doing great, sir.
Awesome.
Thanks for hopping on. We were just talking a little football. Are you a football guy?
A little bit. I mean, I don't know enough to go into the depth like y'all just did with the nuance of and the impact of Kirk's signing deal there. But I saw the headline the other day. I'm like, hey, I know who they're talking about.
Nice. Yeah, I played football starting in middle school all the way through freshman year of college, and had a blast doing it. Just because of that, like I love the sport, so
yeah.
I keep up with it, see what's happening.
Yeah, I played in high school from freshman year to senior year. I signed up because I saw a cheerleader, and
of course,
yeah, and she seemed to only talk to football players, and I didn't know any better. It's because there were only football players and cheerleaders on campus at the time. It was during the summer two-a-days.
Yeah.
I only was up there because a friend of mine was on the freshman football team. He's like, hey, come on up to the campus with me and we'll hang out after practice. I'm like, all right, cool, man. And then I saw her. I'm like, oh, she's cute. And he was like, yeah, she only talks to football players. I'm like, can I still sign up? So the next day I'm getting
pads.
Yeah, the next day I'm getting fitted for pads. I didn't know the game, and I'm on the field. We had just done warm-ups, and then they're like, all right, quarterbacks over there, receivers over there, running backs over there, linemen over here. And I'm like, huh? I was a baseball guy, and I'm like, hilarious. I don't know what any of that is. And so one coach, he just said, hey, what position do you play? I'm like, I don't know. A friend of mine said, join the team to talk to a cheerleader, and here I am. He just laughed. And he's like, well, come with me. I'm like, okay, what do we do? He goes, we're linemen. And I was like 5 foot tall at the time. I had a growth spurt of 4 inches, so I ended up at 5'4". But yeah, that was the start of my football career. I got pummeled all freshman year. Came back for more because that girl was still on the cheerleading squad. Never asked her out though. I just never did. It's just by sophomore year though, I loved the game, and I was like, I'm actually good at this. I could play. So then I wound up on the varsity team junior and senior year, and I was like, okay, cool. And then that girl transferred. So yeah, I never saw her again after that.
Damn.
I know.
Yeah, I totally thought that story was going to end, and 3 years later we got married.
Yeah.
Oh, no. My current wife would not appreciate that ending. I met her in the Army. What's the math? Like 6 or 7 years later.
So what?
There you go.
When did you go to the military, and what got you into the military?
Yeah. What got me in the military was not being a good pre-med student. So I got recruited for tuba performance. So yeah, I was also a band geek in high school. So I
Nice.
played tuba. I was really into heavy metal music. And so I got recruited to play tuba at University of the Pacific. At the last second, I was like, you can't save the world playing the tuba. So I switched to pre-med because my mom always told me you're going to go to school, become a doctor, and all that stuff. Well, I barely got out with a 2.1 GPA, realized I ain't going to med school with that. And some recruiters at university said, we do look at the whole person at our university, like Stanford was one of them. And they said, if you can pick up, a nursing degree, get some experience in the medical field, and then take a few classes, a few years down the road to show you can do this and do well in the MCAT, you might have a spot here. No promises from them, just like you. We have students who've done that type of thing. Well, I was broke, and I'm like, okay, I'm out of money, and I can't even borrow any more money. I've hit the maxes on everything, and I'm just tired. I'm tired of going to class. I'm like, hey, the Army, they've got like 200 plus years of experience in creating trauma and then treating it. So I'll do that. They'll pay me to learn how to be a medic or to be in healthcare, and then I get to travel too. I'm like, I haven't gone on a real vacation. I can't remember when, so I'll get to travel the world on Uncle Sam's dime. Let's do this. So I went right into a recruiter's office, and they just had a field day with me. And they're like, "Oh, we got this guy," and so they try to recruit me in as an infantryman, and
of course,
and they didn't tell me it was infantry. They told me the job code, the number for infantry, which was 11 X-ray, which was sort of the generic series for infantry. I didn't know that. To me, it sounded like radiology. So I almost signed. I was like, all right, cool, radiology. And the guy's like, no, that's infantry. I was like, oh, will I at least get to put a Band-Aid on somebody? Like I was going to take it, like, because there was also going to be college loan repayment. And he was like, I can't put that in your contract. So I went on and we had a whole back and forth. I think they offered me to be a tank mechanic, an Apache helicopter mechanic. These were all like the top things they had to fill to make their mission. And I was saying no to all of it. And finally they just like, the recruiter's like doing the used car salesman thing. He's like, all right, well, how about this? All right, how about linguist? But you got to leave today and it's a 6-year enlistment. I'm like, would I be a translator in a hospital? Like I was like helping them stretch this. All I had to do was say yes. They didn't have to be truthful about any of it. I could have learned on the hard way on the back end that they'd lied to me, but they just weren't. I guess they were honest enough that day. And then finally they gave me an ultimatum like, hey, take one of these jobs or we're going to just take you home. And I said, hey, I was up front when I came in. I said, I'm looking for college loan repayment and something in the medical field. I was told you can get me that. I've done my part. I aced the ASVAB, so you can put me anywhere you want. But I just need medical experience by the time I get out. That's what I'm looking for. And I hate to do it because I don't like their uniforms, but the Air Force is right across the hallway here. And the guy got on and I learned that one from my dad. Like, hey, treat it like a car sales. Pit the branches against each other.
It's a great move.
Yeah. And so the guy got on the phone and immediately said, all right, 91 Bravo, you leave next week. And I was like, well, I still got one more semester of school left. So could I leave in June of next year? So it was like 6 months out. And he's like, yes. So I signed up. Apparently I gave up college loan repayment and I got to basic training. They sent me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is where I was born.
Oh,
which
wow.
meant I did a lot of push-ups doing paperwork over there. Like, so every time we filled out that line that said birthplace and I put Fort Sill, Oklahoma, the drill sergeants would see that and thought I messed up or wasn't paying attention. And so they would yell at me and I would tell them, no, I was born here. And then they thought I was lying. So they make me do push-ups until they saw my record. And they're like, oh, he really was born here. All right, recover.
Wow. Oh,
man.
my God.
But I could max
awesome.
the push-up event in the PT test. That was...
I bet after all that,
yeah, I did so many push-ups. So from there, I became a medic. I went to Fort Sam Houston in Texas, got certified to be a medic. And then by the end of that cycle, we had to pick like, where do we want to go from here? Or at least what do we think we might want to go? And, people pick like the 3 favorite continental U.S. assignments, and they're outside the continental U.S. assignments. And for me, I put Germany, and then Germany for both inside. Like I wanted to go to Germany so badly, and get there for Oktoberfest and all that stuff. So my orders came up for Germany. I go. I missed Oktoberfest. I volunteered first day on the job. I volunteered to go to Kosovo because my boss said, hey, we're forming this team of like go-getters. And I've been working on this for the past 3 months and we got a spot if you want it. You would deploy to Kosovo for 6 months. We get you trained up, get you equipped, all that type of thing, get lots of medals, great for your career. And now's a great time because you don't have family yet. And I'm like, all right, cool. Sign me up. I didn't say it like that because she was my sergeant. And so I said, yes. My boss pulls out a legal pad of paper. There's nothing on it. And she writes at the top, Kosovo team 1, Jerry Dugan. I'm like, 3 months. I'm the first guy to say yes to this. I'm not going to make any friends here. There's no way. And sure enough, people use the F word in front of my name for a good month or two. And who's this guy? And like, why is his name first on the list? Like, why is he a specialist? What is going on here? And then they're like, did you not learn not to volunteer for anything? And like, she told me there was already a team and I would joining a great group of people. And they're like, you started the group of people. Now we're all mad at you. I'm like, great. So all that to say, I went to Kosovo for 6 months, came back. This is all before 9/11. And my wife to be, so her name was her name's still Olivia, but she'd come into the unit at a time when I was still in Kosovo and my replacements had also left to go to Kosovo. So there was like this vacuum of leadership as far as competent leaders go. And she just had like one of the most abusive dirtbag type of leaders.
Wow.
I come back with my team of people and the platoon leader, he's kind of feeling the same way. Like this guy, he was with the Rangers when they were in Somalia back in 1993.
No, damn. Okay.
So this guy was like, he's a hard charger. He didn't look like it by the time I met him because he'd become an officer. He'd gotten hurt. A lot of people didn't believe that he was a Ranger until we actually ruck marched together, and we realized we all are running with packs that weigh a fourth of what he's carrying. This guy might be what he says he was. And then there was a special forces recruiter who came along. He recognized Lieutenant Pitus. They hit it off. They were sharing stories from Somalia. And then I was like, oh, this is real. And then they realized I was in the room. They kicked me out. So anyway, Lieutenant Pitus realizes that there was a vacuum of leadership while we were doing the transition. Now this first team of go-getters has come back. and so he paired us off with each new person. And I got paired off with somebody named Private First Class Morales. Her name's also Olivia, and I was like, oh, she's pretty cute. And so my job was to teach her everything I learned in Kosovo during a 7-month deployment. So 6 months became 7 months. I was like, all right, cool, I got this. I ran out of content in 4 days, and I was like, oh, shoot, this is, and everybody else, like they taught everything they knew within a week or two, and they were done. And I was like, dang it, but I still like her and I want to keep talking to her, and I don't have the guts to ask her out. So at that time we had something called correspondence courses, and they added up to promotion points, but I didn't care about the promotion points because I already had a degree and I already maxed out points. But I signed up for almost every correspondence course they had in the US Army, and I was doing this just to say, yeah, I learned to do this in Kosovo. And so it was like stuff we never had to do in Kosovo, like how do you set up the bathroom in a chemical environment. We didn't do a demo, but like I talked her through it. Like, you scrape up the dirt, you do this, you do that. She's like, oh wow. And I'm like, oh, and this is how you set up an OE254 field antenna for the radio, and this is how it goes into all this stuff. She's like, oh wow. And then she'd ask all kinds of questions. I'm like, oh, this is working. And 3 months later, I finally ask her out, and she asks, what took you so long? I'm like, what?
Of course.
And she said, I've been dropping hints for like 3 months that I like you. And I'm like what? Like, what was a hint? And she looked at me dead in the eyes, and she still makes fun of me to this day about it 23 years later. She's like, do you really think I cared about how to set up an OE254 or, how to set up a landing zone in the middle of the night? Am I ever going to do that? No, I was getting out of the Army. And I was like, but you said yes to all that stuff, and you just ate it up, and you just kept asking questions. He's like, that's called keeping you engaged in the conversation because I liked you. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, do all girls do this? She goes, yes. And so not only did I realize, oh, Olivia likes me as well, I had like this flashback all the way to middle school of like every girl that did this. And I'm like, I was such a lonely kid back then. Like, wow, all these girls had a crush on me, and I totally missed that. And I'm like, oh well, but this one's here, and I know, and I, fired my shot. And yeah, that was 23 years ago. This 2 days ago, as of 2 days ago, 23 years.
Nice. Congratulations.
And then November of 2024 will be our 23rd and what do you call that? Marriage anniversary.
Yeah. Nice. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a wild story from kind of getting, medical school to Army to finding someone you end up spending the rest of your life with. And then I guess a part of this is your story where you realize that the Army wasn't for you, or you realize work after the Army wasn't for you, and kind of what you built in today. What was that moment in time like for you, where you were deciding if you were going to really leave the Army and then work after and everything in between?
So, since this is an Army story, I got to start it with, so there I was.
Yeah.
There's more to it. Oh, no kidding. So there I was. So for real though, I was in Baghdad with 3rd Infantry Division. We had just invaded Iraq. So this is roughly June or July of 2003. Now I'm also not expecting to go home because I'm a medic, I'm a short timer, and all the movies say Doc is going to die. And I had even written a letter home, like not the just in case I die letter. This might be my last letter, and I need to make sure it's sent. But I didn't write it in a way that my wife would recognize that was that letter. So like all the words are in it so that she could show that to our kids when they got older. But I wanted to make sure that was written. So that was written, that was sent. But now it's summertime, it's Baghdad, and we just got a warning order, which is sort of just like hey, heads up, but more formal, a warning order that we're going to return back to Kuwait within X number of weeks. No exact date, of course, because operational security, blah, blah, blah. But now our briefings are starting of like what it will be like to transition home. And I realize, oh, we're really going. This is going to happen. Like we're leaving Baghdad. And I didn't die. Well, yet, I mean, we still got to get out of Baghdad back into Kuwait. But if that happens, then I'm going to make it home. And at that point, though, my plan was I'm just going to re-enlist and try to get into physician assistant school. But somewhere between that moment, realizing we're going back to Kuwait to fly back home and actually getting home, I realized I don't know if I want to re-enlist because to re-enlist just to get into PA school was a risk because it wasn't guaranteed I was going to get into PA school because I hadn't retaken any classes. So I still hadn't proved that I could do well in college again, or if I'd matured at all since the first time I left. And so there was that, but it was two things. One was kind of going through the letters that I received. So this is after I got home. I met my daughter for the first time. She was like 3 months old. And at some point, my wife and I are kind of going through the letters that we had written to each other and just kind of lining them all up. She's got them all in a binder from start to finish. It's really cool. And you can still feel the fine dust from Iraq and Kuwait in the paper.
That's interesting.
And so she always tells people about them like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And then it always makes my tear duct feel like it's got sand in it. But so we're going through those letters and I'm realizing the letters from like her uncles are saying things like, hey, don't worry about your family. We're taking great care of them. And I know that their attempt was really just to make me feel good, feel at ease. Don't worry about them because they really were being taken care of. But deep down inside, I was thinking, but I need to be there. Like my son is going to be 2 years old. Actually, by now he is 2 years old. And if I stay in the Army, he's not really going to know me a whole lot. And if I stay in the Army, my daughter's probably not going to really have a first memory of me until she's like 3 years old because the way the deployments would fall. And then my wife and I, we're still newlyweds in a way. We're still in our first 2 years of marriage. And I'm probably going to be gone 50% of the time if this whole deployment thing keeps happening. And then, so that was the first thought in my head. And then we had our awards ceremony. So we pulled our whole battalion together. It was like 700 of us and we're getting our awards. And, some guys got bronze stars, silver stars, and well-deserved. And then I got an Army Commendation Medal with V device. I'm like, what did I do? And they give you the write-up. So when you get your award, you also get the write-up that says why you got the award. And mine just said, see attached. I'm like, well, what did it say? So I have no idea. To this day, I still have no idea. Just a C attached. So somewhere in the ether, there is a memo that said why I got the award I got. But I started to overhear like the soldiers in my unit talking like, hey, did you see Sergeant Dugan do this? Like, yeah, I was like, yeah, they were firing cannons. And then like somebody yelled medic and then he just like took off running. And I'm like, they were shooting cannons. That's like explosive. Oh, there was a guy like the vehicle was on fire, but somebody else was putting out the fire while I took care of that guy. I'm like, I could have blown up back then. Oh, wow. Or, hey, I went and I did this and we were taking fire. And I'm like, how did I not die? And, I mean, I know now from a very spiritual perspective, but it just kind of hit me like, okay, I did some stupid stuff on that first deployment. I don't think if I do the same stuff, I don't think I'll come back a second time or a third. Like
right.
You can't do that.
Yeah, there's a limit to that stuff.
Yes. Like you can only tempt fate so many times before it's like, all right, you keep playing around too much. You're dead. And so that was kind of the aha moment. Like, okay, I'm done. I got talked into doing like a try one with the reserves where you get to try for 1 year instead of like a 3-year enlistment with the reserves. But halfway through, I'm like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. So they went ahead and exited me out. So, but yeah, I left the Army November 2003 and my wife and I just looked at where do we get the most free babysitting? That was the thing. Cause I mean, now I was jobless and leaving the Army.
Yeah.
And, we realized her hometown, Corpus Christi, Texas, had almost all her family there. We had like the first grandkids in the family. So there was a fight who got to watch our kids. We're like, this is only going to last for a few more years. Let's take advantage of that. So we moved to Corpus Christi. I wound up getting hired with a Catholic faith-based healthcare system to do their new employee orientation. That was a big culture shock too. And yeah, we got free babysitting for a good long while. And
Nice.
yeah, we took advantage of that. And 17 years later, we finally moved up here to Dallas. So that's, yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in Dallas? If you don't mind me
Right
asking.
outside of downtown. So like you got
Okay.
downtown, you got the big Omni Theater with all the lights and Reunion Tower. Across that bridge, I can see all that.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not super familiar with the area, but I did grow up in Dallas, grew up in Coppell. So
Okay.
I saw that. We left in 2004. So I was there
Oh.
90s leading up to that. So sorry,
Yeah.
a cool connection there. Well,
Yeah. I go to Carrollton all the time to get Korean
yep.
fried chicken.
Nice. Some
Yeah.
good food out there.
Oh, yes.
So, sorry, Ty, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say, we I'd speak for both of us. Just appreciate you for your service and doing all that. Just hearing you talk about it, I think a lot of us civilians, when we think of people that are enlisted, don't think about the fact that a lot of people don't see their children born. They don't see, some kids grow up and then also have to write letters like you did. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. And thank you again. And one of the things I did want to ask is, obviously you talk a lot about and have a lot of experience with leadership and whatnot. Did you learn a lot of what you pull on now from your time in the Army, or is it more of things not to do? Where does that landscape kind of fit into what you do today?
I'd say a lot of the foundation of what I do today did start in the Army. And it was a blend of both. It was like what not to do, because I was that guy that, there's probably some examples out there that have me as the unnamed example. So the things not to do. Basic training, they have this thing called platoon guide where they have like student leaders, kind of like hall monitors, but they give it a cooler name so it sounds better in the Army. So I was in charge of my entire platoon of 64 soldiers to make sure they showed up for chow on time, that everybody had their shoes in order before the drill sergeants came. So I was like our last line of defense before we got inspected by any drill sergeant at any time. And I held that job 3 times in 9 weeks because I kept getting fired. And, and with that though, like the only example of leadership I had was really like drill sergeants yelling at you. So I thought that's how you led. And, they would tell me you can't yell at people like that. I'm like, I don't understand because you keep yelling at me. And so I got through basic training and go on to Fort Sam Houston to be a medic. And my goal when I was going through medic training was I'm going to lay low. I'm tired of this leadership thing. And like you're responsible for everybody, for everything. And I'm like, I don't like it. It's just, I want to do my own thing and I want to pass this course and be a medic. I kid you not. Day 1, we're in class and each class had about 35 students in it and at least 3 cadre or instructors that took turns because this is like a 24/7 type of school. So every platoon had at least one drill sergeant and the drill sergeants all rotated. They handled like the soldier stuff. And then the cadre handled the actual medical training stuff. And then they collaborated for like an overall experience. So one instructor, the lead instructor's telling us all the rules about the class. Another one's in the back of the room, 2 others in the back of the room, sorry. And then the fourth one is walking up and down the aisle doing what we call the shark attack. Waiting for somebody to fall asleep so they can punish you in the back of the room. And every time that happened, I'm like, I'm taking notes. I'm awake. And I'd nudge my buddy because we all were buddied up. And I nudged him. And he knew my plan. Like, I'm laying low. I'm not going to be platoon guide. He and I went through basic training together. So he was like, yeah, you're laying low this time around, right? I'm like, yes, Grimes. I'm laying low. I'm not doing anything. Nobody's going to know my name until it's graduation time. He's like, cool. But I kid you not. Day 1, we're getting the briefing. And that sergeant doing the shark attack is walking up and down the aisle, stops in front of my table. I'm like, don't look up. Just keep writing. And I see her hand tap in front of me to get my attention. And I look up and she says, grab your hat, get your battle buddy, meet us in the back of the room. Very quiet because the other guy's still talking in the front. And I'm like, yes, Sergeant. And she leaves. And I look over at Grimes and Grimes is all mad. He's like, mother, what did you do? I'm like, I don't know.
I was taking notes.
I was taking notes. And she's like, we don't have all day. She's like, very softly, but we could hear her. She's like, we don't have all day. Hurry up. And I'm like, all right. And so we get up. We're expecting to go to the back and do lots of push-ups and flutter kicks and all those things. So we go to the back. It's kind of like tented off, and there's 3 instructors in there, and they're like, hey, so you got specialist rank on. So because I had a college degree, I came in as an E4, not an E1. And so I'm like, yeah, I graduated college, sergeant. And so I get to wear this. And they're like, okay, so you weren't prior service? No. Where'd you go to basic training? Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Okay. Do you have any leadership roles while you were there? I was a platoon guide 3 times. Why 3 times? I kept getting fired. Why'd you keep getting fired? Because I wasn't that good at it, apparently. and then they asked me a few other questions, like what was my major in college? Because a lot of them are like English majors or business majors or something like that. And I said I was a pre-med student. And they said, okay, so what are you doing here? And I was like, I wasn't that good of a pre-med student. Like I knew my stuff, but I had a 2.1 GPA, so I'm here. And they all looked at each other, they nodded, and they said, hey, you said Fort Sill? Yes, Sergeant. And they looked at each other again. They're like, yeah, he's the one. That's the guy. I'm like, that's the guy. It turns out they heard about me coming in from Fort Sill and that I had a degree, like they knew my file. And so they were looking for me. And that's why it took so long for the shark attack. They were looking for my name on my uniform.
Wow.
And they said, all right, we're going to make you the class sergeant. And so your job is to be in charge of the 35 students, make sure they show up to class on time. If somebody's at sick call, if somebody's not feeling well, somebody gets hurt, somebody's at the PX, you need to know where they are at all times. I'm like, okay, cool. Thank you. So it was me, it was 3 squad leaders, and my buddy Grimes is so mad. And because they asked, who do you want to be your assistant platoon guide? And I looked over at him and he's like, you better not. I was like, I'd like Grimes to be my assistant platoon guide. They're like, are you sure? I'm like, well, until you find somebody better, yes. And he was so mad. He was like, man, not only that, but you put me in the spotlight. I was like, hey, you got me out of basic training. Like,
yes.
Like I passed my run because he ran his 2 miles and then he ran the rest of my 2 miles with me. And so I owe the guy a lot. And we eventually replaced him as assistant platoon guide with somebody who also had a college degree. And he was so grateful. But it didn't matter because wherever I went, he had to be with me. So it was like he was anyway, the assistant platoon guide. But all that to say, I tried to avoid it. I became the class sergeant, and within 3-4 weeks out of the 10-week program, I realized that the instructors had a nickname for me, and that was the warden.
Oh,
and they didn't mean it as a compliment. It was like,
yeah,
you know, he's little. He's just in everybody's face, like he's drill sergeant himself, and it was just because everybody was always. I guess where I went to basic training, like if you got instructions, you said yes, sergeant, or yes, drill sergeant. You went and did it. I don't know where these guys went to basic training, but whenever I relayed instructions, they're like, well, that's not what the sergeant said, or hey, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, you're 25 years old. Why are you telling me you have to go to the bathroom? You had 7 minutes to take care of that. Like you're older than me, man. and so like I was just like, no, you can't go. We're going in class right now. But when I hand you off to the sergeants, you ask them. But I got you in class. That is my job. Get in there now. And so by the time we did our field training exercise in week number 9 out of 10, I had so many challenges to meet people in the wood line because they had words for me, which words meant they had some fists and they wanted to beat me up. And I would take them up on it. I'm like, yeah, okay, if you want to go there. I mean, because I got in a lot of fights in basic training too, for some reason. Probably the same reason, actually. And so after like the 3rd day of this, or the 2nd day, one of the drill sergeants pulled me aside from a different platoon. He's like, hey, we didn't have a whole lot of chance to talk, but I noticed you get into a lot of fights or a lot of threats to get beat up. It's like, I can handle that, Sergeant. It's no big deal. He's like, all right, well, can I give you some unsolicited advice? Because chances are when you go onto your next duty station, you're going to be asked to lead people, whether you want to or not. And it's just going to be something you got to get used to. I was like, yes, I'd take that advice. And he said, try talking to people as if they were your equals, as if they were your equal, regardless of your role as platoon sergeant, squad leader, team leader, the rank, and so on. Just talk to them as if you're equals. Your authority is the position. The reality is you take that collar away, the rank, the insignia, the job title, you're just 2 people trying to get the job done. But try that tomorrow. Well, we're going to help you with that tomorrow. I was like, really? Yeah. We're going to assign you to another platoon for the day. Your squad leaders will have to be in charge. So give them a briefing and prepare them. But they won't be able to lean on you at all. And your success is going to be dependent on how they do. But you have no control over that. It's like, all right, cool. And of course, you're just a student, leader. So you have no power over them either. I'm like, oh, that's a good point. So I briefed up my squad leaders, and all three of them, I just told them, hey, I'm told I'm going to be reassigned to another platoon tomorrow. But here's the taskings for the day. And so I won't see you all again until 1700 or 5 p.m. tomorrow. And this is what I know to help you be successful. And it turns out I probably should have shared this with you sooner. And when I was done with my briefing, it lasted like 15 minutes. All three squad leaders were like, thank you. It's about time. I was like, what? Like, yeah, we're all capable. We're just waiting for you to kind of like let go and share the power here and the authority, because we could have made this a whole lot easier for you and keep all these guys in line. And so, yeah, we'll do you proud. Like, you'll do me proud. No, just do this for you. Do this for them. Don't worry about me. I graduate and I'll just go into my next unit. So next day, they're killing it. And I'm near a radio, so I can overhear the conversations about how they're doing all over this Camp Bullis area. And we come back together at 5 p.m. There's 4 classes, and I was class number 1. But for some reason, we're reporting out from 4 to 1. So I'm the last one to go. And the first class, they report back. They're missing like 2 people. This is the end of the day, so you shouldn't be missing anybody. But they're missing 2 people. Can't account for them. So they all have to like take off and go find the guys. The next platoon not only is missing somebody, they're missing like a gas mask. So they got to go find that gas mask. The guys next to me, they're missing, I think, 3 people. And the funny thing was, those 3 people were just on the other side of the grounds where we were, doing a job right there in front of us. And the class sergeant just freaked out and didn't know. And just, I don't know where they are. And the drill sergeant looked over his shoulder, saw the 3. I'm like, you sure you don't know where they are? Okay, well, you guys just do push-ups until I get tired. And then it was my turn. And I did a salute. I said, 35 soldiers assigned, 35 soldiers present, 35 weapons, and 35 masks. And the drill sergeant just smiled. And he just like, yes, snapped a salute back. He goes, that's how it's done. I was like, oh, and then put my salute down. And then it was time to like dismiss everybody for chow, except for the guys still doing push-ups. And like everybody was still looking for a thing, but my 35 guys were done. Like we just had to wait for the chow truck to show up. And when I turned around to dismiss my team, my group, they were all smiling. They were like, yeah, we did that. And I just looked at them. I said, great work, everybody. And fall out. And so when that was done, I talked to my squad leaders. I'm like, that was way easier. Like, get that done and just get out of the way. Like, just tell you what you needed to do and get out of the way. And they're like, yeah, that's so crazy, right? I'm like, yeah. So that was one of the first lessons I had, was treat them as equals and trust them to be smart enough to get the job done. And then from there, just let them do their job. And then if you have to support them in any way administratively, do it. Let them have the success, let them have the wins, and they'll just keep coming back for more. And the weird thing was, I was getting the credit for their success. Like, these 3 squad leaders killed it. Those squads did the job.
Right.
Somehow everybody was saying, hey, great job there, first class leader. And I'm like, I was like taking a nap in the woods over here with 2nd platoon. Like, that wasn't me. And they're like, no, it was you, because they've been paying attention and you prepared them. I was like, okay, cool. And then from there, I go to my first duty station. And then that's when I'm introduced to the idea of like leaders eat last. So my squad leader was also my best friend. Every time we went to chow, he'd always insist I went first, because he was a sergeant, I was a specialist. And then it's like, Dugan, you go first. I'm like, but I'm holding the door. He goes, you go. But I'm holding the door. You go. He goes, Dugan, do push-ups right now. I'm like, okay. And then when he did, everybody knew we were best buds. So when I had to do push-ups, everybody was like, oh, they're breaking up. The dynamic duo is not the dynamic duo anymore. And then I got back up, because I still had to respect him and his rank in front of everybody.
Of course, yeah.
It was off duty that we were best buds. And so because I was his friend, I couldn't disrespect him in front of everybody like that. And when I got back up, he said, I'm the sergeant, I'm the squad leader. My job is to make sure my team is fed first, clothed first, taken care of, rested first. And I square myself away. I'm the leader. So you never eat before I do. Unless you become an officer and I got to salute you, then I eat first. But until then, you always eat first. I was like, cool, I got that. And so it was just like, I thought that was just like a traditional thing we did. But then I realized with other soldiers, whenever the leader went and ate first, the first thing you'd hear somebody say who was a lower enlisted person was, there goes Sergeant so-and-so just taking care of himself as always. Like they immediately thought and equated that as, there goes that guy to take care of himself, when you got this whole team that hasn't eaten breakfast even. And this guy's had 2 meals for sure. And it was just like a little thing that went a long way. And so just by having your soldiers eat first, you were communicating, you matter to me and I need you healthy and safe.
There's a lot of subliminal messaging that happens there when you take care of others before yourself, especially in team settings like that, whether it be football, like you said, the Army and what have you. So it's good that you learned that through example and through those experiences. That's incredible. One of the other things I wanted to mention is what you were talking about with delegation. I've talked to people in executive positions and companies, and one of the things that they say about managing is you have to master that power of delegating. Because like you're right, there's very few people apparently in the Army and also in the corporate world that are willing to teach you how to manage effectively.
Yeah.
Now, there's obviously books out there. I don't know if you've read Jocko Willink's books on leadership, extreme leadership. Yeah, those he's awesome. But very few people are trying to teach you like that. It's like you said, you have to empower other people to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of making decisions, it sounds like you learned leadership style from the Army, but you also realized that it wasn't for you long term. What influenced your decision to move into your next phase of life and follow a different passion? Because I'm not sure if you stuck with medicine after the Army, because I think you went into something else. So what was the passion behind that, and what was the decision there?
Yeah. The real passion was I need to take care of my family. And the first thing was I need to be present for my family. I wanted to be the kind of dad that wasn't just there for the kids, but was also there for the spouse and really, like, how do I be a better husband than my uncles ever were? Or like my dad got divorced when I was 11, and that really tore us apart. And now there was a mom involved too. So
Of course, yeah.
It was more her in that case. But I also saw with my uncles, like they're splitting up their families and just the impact it had on all the kids. And so one of the cool things about my wife and I was when we got married, or even before we got married and we were still dating, we talked a lot about like, what would the ideal marriage look like for you? And how would you know that you've found the person you're looking for? And deep down, we're both thinking, oh, I already found the person. But like we shared with each other our past. And because of that, when we do decide to get married, we absolutely got to know that the person we're committing to isn't just hyped up in the moment, that they truly are somebody that we would see ourselves with till the very end of our lives. And a lot of people don't think that far ahead. They think, oh, wow, yeah, I'm going to get married. We're going to go to the Bahamas. We're going to have this, this, and this. We were thinking totally different. We were thinking in terms of, we're in our 80s. Our kids are probably going to be in their 60s. What kind of experience will we have with our grandkids? Like we were thinking that far ahead.
That's awesome.
Where would we live? We don't know, but we would always be together. And this is before like the movie Up came out, which is the cutest couple ever, in my opinion. Yeah. And so like we had conversations like that. So I knew that that's my wife. So that was the biggest driver for me to get out. I thought I'd stay in the healthcare field because that was the whole point of joining the Army, to get back into medical school. And the first jobs I looked at, it turns out the Army didn't at that time certify you very well. They
no way. You don't say.
No, right? So like things I could do as a medic. You ever see that movie Three Kings? And Mark Wahlberg gets shot, and then George Clooney comes up and he does this like stick a needle in the guy's chest and like a valve, and he can breathe again because he's like reinflated the guy's chest cavity.
I think I've seen something like that, but yeah.
I know how to do that.
Okay. Sweet.
I know how to insert a chest tube. Now, it's been 20 years, so you don't want me to be the guy to do that unless I'm the only one around. And that's the only option we've got. And the only option being like if it's too far to take you to a hospital. Anyway, so all that to say, I knew how to do chest tubes. I knew how to do decompression of people's chest cavities. If you got shot with a gunshot wound, I knew occlusive dressings from whatever's around us. I could do a tracheotomy, like all those things, sutures even. My hand gestures. That's the international sign for sutures. So I knew those things. And these are like paramedic level things. Like I could push drugs. I could do IVs. I could do IVs in the dark while in the back of a Humvee with night vision goggles on. I don't recommend it, but I could. and so I had these skills. These are paramedic level skills. I could run AEDs, do all that. So I was highly trained, highly skilled, but I was only certified as an EMT basic with a couple of additional like trauma certifications. So what that meant for me in the civilian world was that I might be able to do all the things a paramedic can do, but I can only get paid $8 an hour and drive the ambulance. I can't even turn around and help with chest compressions. Like that was how uncertified I was in the real world or the civilian world. And so I'm like, okay, great. What would it take for me to get the certification to be a paramedic and earn their income? Because that was going to double my income anyway for our family. And I was like, well, you got to go to school for 2 years. I'm like, I need something in 2 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of looked around and like, well, what about transferable skills? That was the big topic when I was transitioning out was think about your transferable skills. You've been a supervisor. So what could you supervise in? And I was like, well, I don't want to be a supervisor in fast food or a Walmart, like nothing against those jobs. Just again, there was a certain dollar amount per hour I needed to earn to support my family.
Right. And
those jobs weren't going to cut it. Even contemplated like joining up with the United Arab Emirates Army, which is almost all foreign born people in their military. I was like, what? But I was one rank too low for what they wanted. I was like, okay, that, probably for the better. The whole reason for getting out was to be with my family, and to join them would mean I'd have to go to UAE instead of be at home. So that worked out. And I just looked at a couple other things, and all of them required, like, it was great pay, but I would not be around my family. At the last minute, before I got out of the Army, my mother-in-law, she's working at a hospital, and she said, hey, they're looking for a trainer who has a bachelor's degree, experience in training people, and loves to talk. And I thought of Jerry. It was just the way she said the last part, loves to talk. Apparently I talk too much for her. But she was like, but it's really good. This is what it pays. And I did the math. I'm like, that is more than what we're looking for. And I put my application in, did the interview, and they're like, this guy's perfect. We're looking for a guy who is closer to the age of our college grads, because nursing or the education departments in healthcare traditionally were where nurses went to retire. They're the tail end of the career. They just want to pass what they know onto their the next generation of nurses, and not have to do patient care anymore, get home at a decent hour. That's kind of what that department would be made up of. And that was the counter to that. They were like, let's bring in a guy who isn't that and is younger and can relate to college kids a little bit better than we can. And if he wants to go to nursing school, let's send him to that. And then we can have him as a nurse educator on top of that. And it's like, oh, it's a win-win. And then in a few years, he'll go to med school. He wins in his thing. So that was my first job out of the Army, was education coordinator. I was doing new employee orientation. I was a liaison for a high school health science academy for a health system that had, at that time, 4 hospitals and about 20 or 30 clinics. And then about a year went by. My boss came up to me and said, hey, we got money in the budget to send you to nursing school. And so you do that. You still work with us, but you only have to work for us for 20 hours a week, go to school for 20 hours, but we're going to pay you full time. And you know this because you teach this every 2 weeks in orientation, that we have this program. We wanted to put you in the program. And we got somebody ready to talk to you about admissions into the nursing program. What do you say? And I was like, oh, do I have to answer right now? Like, then they were surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, we're expecting an immediate yes, but because that's what we talked about when we hired you. But think about it, pray about it, talk to your wife about it, and whatever you decide. If you decide to go for it, great, we proceed. If you decide not to, that's okay. Don't feel like you have to do this because we're offering it.
That's
because
good.
That was a conversation. Like they were like, that was a conversation a year ago. You've had time to heal from your service in the Army. A lot has changed in a year. and we're fully supportive. We're glad to have you on the team. We want to keep you on the team. And yeah, so don't worry, whatever's best for you. And just let us know at the end of the week. I was like, cool. So yeah, I knew, like, okay, I'm not going to nursing school and I'm not ever going to go to med school. And my wife asked why. I'm like, because it turns out that was my mom's dream. That wasn't my dream. My mom wanted me to be the doctor because that was the Asian thing to do, apparently. She's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just want to be a good husband and a good father and do something that provides with the skills I've got. And it was over time. So I decided to stay in the role I was in. Eventually got fired, went into real estate thinking, oh, I'm going to make my money in real estate. It's 2006. So
Ooh.
yeah, the first year was great.
Yeah.
The next 4 that were not so great. And so I struggled with that. Never really learned how to deal with that market. And it was time to get back in the job force. So this is what, 2010, 2011. And I apply for, again, what skills do I have? Apparently, my morale as a salesperson was gone. I was like, I'm not good at this. I can't get my best friends to do business with me, and I'm taking great care of them. And my wife was like, well, you did really well when you were a trainer. I was like, yeah, I did. And so I got a job as an community educator for a battered women's shelter. And they were looking for a male role model to go out in the community and talk about domestic violence awareness, sexual assault awareness, bystander behavior, go into schools and talk about healthy relationships. And I was like, cool, what's the pay on that? Well, anything that had dollars in the pay range was better than what I was getting as a real estate agent at that time. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. And it was a 4-day work week. So Monday through Thursday. It was even better.
Sweet.
So every weekend was a 3-day weekend. I did that for 3 years, I think. Picked up a master's using my GI Bill in educational technology. Like I started to realize this is my groove. Training people is my thing. And my wife helped me kind of see that. She was like, think about everything you did. Like as a pre-med student, weren't you tutoring the people who were passing the class while you were still failing the class? I was like, yeah, I was. And she's like, so it wasn't like you didn't understand the material. You were just sabotaging yourself. I'm like, yeah, because I would tutor them with key points on the exam, but I never actually took the exam. I would just do a few questions, get tired or bored and leave the class. So the reason why I failed was like a lot of my exams had like 1 or 2 questions done and the rest were just blank, and I'd just turn it in and leave. And so the stuff I did do, I got done well. Just like,
that's wild.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, it's going to take 20 minutes to write out my work on this problem. I don't want to do that. I want to go eat a pizza. And so it's just stupid stuff like that.
So random thing I wanted to ask before you continue here. What you said about realizing that medical school and being a doctor was your mom's dream is a huge step. I think sometimes it takes people a lifetime to figure out that they wanted to be a version of their parents instead of a version of themselves. Yes. Was it just that conversation with your wife that kind of helped you realize that, or was there another moment that spurred that realization?
That was the aha moment. We were in church at the time, and it was during my real estate days. So we're kind of like struggling, like, where are we going to get enough money for our mortgage payment? And how do we put gas in the car? How do we feed the kids? It was like that type of thought was going through my head. While I was volunteering at church, I would take the pastor's sermon and convert it into the small group studies for our church.
Okay, nice.
And so, the pastor's up there talking. He's talking about, whatever it is that you're supposed to do next, God's already given you the provision for that. So whatever you need to take that next step, you already have it now. And it was telling like the story of Moses, and like he had a stick. It was like, take the stick with you. And that stick did a lot. Well, God's power did a lot through the stick. And so I was like, okay, what do I have that'll help me get to the next thing? And I'm just thinking, I need $900 a month or $1,000 a month just to pay this and cover this, and I could take care of the rest. And I realized, wait, I didn't get college loan repayment when I enlisted, but they shafted me by giving me the GI Bill, and I had to pay into that like everybody else for the first year. It was like $100 a month for 12 months. Every service member pays into that their first year in service. And I hated it. I was like, that's beer money, my first year in the Army. So here we are, like I was 33, 34 years old, been out of the Army for about 5-6 years. And I'm thinking, what do I have already that I haven't used that'll provide that income? And it just hits me. I've got this GI Bill that I'm not touching, and it will provide that amount if I go to school full time. And I was like, yes, what should I study? And like, I'm supposed to be taking notes to convert the sermon. And I'm like, I'll just have to watch the recording and do it later. And so I took all these notes. So like, I don't know if I still have it, but my notes are like pastor sermon. All of a sudden it's like dollar signs and like circles and like school and programs. And I turned to my wife. I'm like, I think I need to go back to school. And she's like, what? I think I need to go back to school. She's like, with what? The GI Bill. Like, so we're having this full on conversation in church. She's like, what will you study? Like, not no, or that's a bad idea, or hey, pay attention to Pastor Bill. It was, what will you study? And I was like, I'll get a master's in business administration. She looked at me and she had the look on her face that I now call the Holy Spirit look. Like, it's not really her, it's something else prompting her. And she just has a different look on her face. I've only seen it twice in 23 years. And this was the first time, I think. I forget the first time, actually. Anyway, so this is one of those times. And she looks at me, she says, I think you need to get something in education. And I was like, education? What is, like, I was about to say, what do you know? But I was thinking it though. I'm like, what does she know? And as soon as I said, what does she know? In my head, I'm getting a flashback all the way back to my college days, University of the Pacific. And I'm talking to my faculty advisor about my barely 2.0 GPA. And he's recommending to me that maybe I should get a career in teaching and transfer over to the education department. And it's dawning on me, like, how would he have known that? Because like, where did he see me teaching anybody anything? And it's like, it wasn't until that moment I realized, this guy didn't just sign off on my own papers. He signed off on everybody's papers. So he saw the people who were struggling and all of a sudden weren't struggling. And he'd ask them, how did you pull it off? What kind of work did you put in? And they're like, oh, hey, Jerry tutored me. And this Jerry? I don't know if he showed him my transcripts, but like, he knew, like, okay, that Jerry shouldn't be helping anybody because he's failing that class. But enough people apparently told him that I helped them. So awesome. When he talked to me, he was like, hey, maybe you should switch over to education. And I was like, nah, because those who can't, they teach. And he's like, that was the last time he gave me any advice. He just signed my stuff and got me out of there. Then my time in the Army, the class sergeant roles, I was in charge of a guy that we nicknamed Gomer Pyle in basic training. And my job was to make sure he graduated. So whenever we were getting tested out for stuff, I had to be in line with him. He wasn't my battle buddy, but I had to be in line with him from start to finish. So I had to go first. He had to watch me do the thing. And then I had to stay and cheer him on, which was basically like shouting out answers, not at him, but loud enough for him to overhear and do the thing. And the drill sergeants were all in on it. They're like, oh, that's his guy to get him through. And the guy graduated.
Nice.
And his family met me and they cried. They're like, we didn't think he was going to make it. Thank you so much. He spoke so highly of you. I'm like, and then so fast forward, my first job out of the Army is that education role. And then even as a real estate sales agent, we had a sales manager responsible for training our new agents. But somehow I was the guy actually training our new agents on our sales system and everything. And then my next job after that was community educator. And that's the role I was in when we were having this conversation. And I'm like, oh, and my wife was the one. She was like, you should get something in education. So yeah, I applied for a master's program in organizational development. That program went away, wound up landing in educational technology. Loved it. I was like, this is the science behind learning. And they're like, yes. So all our teachers, this is what they know how to do. They're like, yes, but unfortunately we teach to standardized tests. Like, but you just proved to me that doesn't work. Yeah, that's what happens when politics gets involved and lawyers. You're like, that sucks. So just a little food for thought. If you have a school district that's focused on teaching to standardized tests, or entire states, we're actually doing our kids a disservice. And it's proven that project-based learning provides the most relevance and application of learning material. And they do better on standardized tests than programs that focus on the standardized tests. Oh, so anyway,
I wish every single school I went into knew that, because I literally remember feeling ill after taking a test or going to a test just from the stress it was causing. And I mean, I always felt like, I'm pretty sure we all felt the same way. when you're doing projects or anything hands-on where you're talking to other people and exchanging ideas and doing things like that, you learn way more.
You do.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a
Unfortunately,
movie
it took
with
him that long to figure that out.
Michelle Pfeiffer's in the movie. It's about a Marine who got out of the Army, became a teacher, and really just turned the classroom style of teaching on its head. And she applied project-based learning. She realized none of the stuff I'm talking about makes any sense to these students because none of it relates to them. And so she changed her teaching style to make every concept that she covered relatable to their lives. And how does this make their lives better? And because that approach, they all wound up doing better. It's kind of like stand and deliver. And when they made math and calculus applicable to Latino students in the inner city, it was like, oh man, this is awesome. So yeah, that's why it works. It's like, so project-based learning where you let the students take the content and apply it to their local environment and their actual interests. They'll actually perform better and understand the concepts deeper than anybody else. So so I learned that in my master's program.
That's excellent.
And I loved it, got out of there, applied it to where I was working. And then I got picked up for another job, doubled our income, got picked up for another job, doubled our income again. So within less than 10 years of going to this program, I, doubled my income twice for our family.
That's wonderful.
And it was just like, man. And so that leads us to like where we are now. And like at the end of 2022, I was like, all right, I'm feeling burned out. I just came off some big projects. I got a leader that's kind of hard to work with. And my wife, she saw the struggle I was going through and she just said, Jerry, quit your job. I want my husband back. And so when she said that, I was like, oh, that's easy peasy. And I typed up my resignation letter like that night, set it up to send at 9 a.m. and the next day, talked to HR the next morning at 8 a.m. just to give them a heads up I was doing what I was doing and why, and my prediction for what was going to happen next, which all came to fruition and then some. And I put in my 30-day notice and I left. Our plan was to take 3 months off at the end of the year and then go job hunting at the start of 2023. And instead I started a business, wrote a book, published it, and created a leadership framework based on everything we've been talking about. And that's where we are today, doing keynote presentations, workshops, and group coaching for leaders that want to create this legacy of servant leadership where they are and create a best place to work. And not just be a leader who gets paid a lot, but be a leader that's transforming the lives of their customers and the teams they lead. So, yeah.
I definitely think you picked up all the keys to have a successful workshop and teach all these leaders what they need to know, because gave us some great examples, and that is a wonderful story. I know that we're coming to the end of our hour here, so I want to be respectful of time. Are you okay, Jerry, with time here? Okay.
Yeah, I got a call in like 15 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, no. 30.
Okay.
I'm not a real clock.
Well, Tyler, I don't know how you feel, but Jerry, I would love to set up a second episode with you to go into more about, how you help people learn about these leadership tactics, how you get them to get beyond the rut and move into whatever they want to do in life. So if that's okay with you, we'll reach out to you and schedule that.
That'd be awesome. I'd be honored. Thank you.
Awesome. And normally towards the end, we ask our guests to tell everyone how they can reach out to you. So your website, social media, anything like that, let everyone know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah. The best place to go is beyondtherut.com. That is the website for my podcast. From there, if you want to work with me to do leadership development, there's a tab that says work with Jerry. It'll take you there. Links to my book, the show on different platforms, and also any guest appearances I've done. So even like this conversation will go into my Spotify player. So there's a tab that says appearances, and you can find this there. And my social media is all tagged out throughout that website. So beyondtherut.com. And there's also a free tool on there for how to create a life, like how to plan out that life that you want to live, like define success on your terms. And it really maps out like what does success look like in your faith journey, your family life, your fitness levels, both physical and emotional, your finances, and then what's that future person like that you want to become. And then from there, you develop, okay, here are my goals. This is what's real to me, relevant to me. And it really helps you create an action plan to make that a reality. So, and that's free. It's on the website. You'll see it's got free on it. It's the only thing that has the big capital letters for free. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing. You're definitely inspiring a lot of leaders in this new generation here. So thank you for your time with them and with us today, and appreciate it. We'll have to schedule something here soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. I had a lot of fun, and the hour went by fast.
It did.
Dude, no kidding. It always does.
Yeah.
Usually.
It does.